All right, so now I'm going to talk about model changes, and then I'll close out the lesson by running the cleanup process for the character with Advanced Skeleton. When this character was first designed, I decided to give her a foot design that was closer to a quadruped, since she's a fox. This means the ankle is elevated off the ground and the character walks on the ball of her feet. However, when it came to her sneakers, I decided to design them to look like they accommodate a human-like foot. I didn't think much of this clashing design choice until it was time to rig it. I eventually settled on a dual foot chain solution, one that allowed her foot to have regular functionality expected for a rig, and the other that allowed the sneaker to have the foot functionality expected for a sneaker. The end result was achieved for the most part. Foot features are very complex and require a lot of math nodes, so having to do this twice was not a smart thing. It was definitely an unnecessary challenge to resolve. For this course, I've decided to alter her foot design to better resemble a human foot, so I have made the modifications in ZBrush. The underside of her foot still has the fox-like padding, but her heel now plants like a biped. Since I'm now moving forward with an end cloth solution for the sneakers, this new foot design is necessary because the end cloth sneaker will rely heavily on the rigged toe for deformation. One big issue that I had with the previous rig is how the leg is posed by default. It's a cool pose that pushes countering masses in the profile and also curves versus straights. It has a very cool superhero action feel to it, but it is a very difficult pose to route joints through. As you can see, it's very hard to chart a straight line from the knee to the ankle. So I went into ZBrush and bent her legs to a pose that will facilitate the rigging process. I think this is very important, especially because of my new plan to use a double knee for this rig. I don't want any issues with joint placement. Advanced Skeleton can get confused if you do not explicitly give it an idea of which way the leg is going to bend. And with this double knee I'm shooting for, I could definitely foresee an issue arising in that department. The next model change I made is related to the subdivision of the final riggable body mesh. Since a bulk of this course is focused around corrective deformation, I've decided to allocate more geometry to the sculpting process at rigging time by the way of a higher resolution rig mesh. I went to ZBrush and grabbed subdivision level 3 of the character's body for the rig. The typical low resolution model used for rigs don't allow for too much detailing when it comes to sculpting blend shape fixes. An LOD solution can be used where a high resolution renderable mesh intended for blend shapes is wrap deformed to a low resolution mesh which is skinned to the rig. But the expense of wrap deformation in some cases is more expensive than just going with one higher resolution mesh. Don't get me wrong though, in cases where blend shape sculpting is going to be very detailed and granular, and where an even higher resolution mesh is required, it may be best to go with the skinned low resolution mesh controlling the higher resolution renderable mesh intended for blend shapes. But for the level of detail I'm going for, subdivision level 3 of this character mesh from ZBrush will do just fine to address skinning and corrective blend shapes. That brings the total polygon count of her body mesh to approximately 259,000. Whenever you think about it being too much, remember this is a film asset, and also remember that it is the only dense mesh that the rig will be processing. I mentioned earlier when showcasing the wrap deformation room file that I went back to ZBrush to grab subdivision level 3 of her leggings. This was done so that the leggings could match the detail level of her new higher resolution body. The leggings are a form-fitting attire, and making sure that the corrective morphs or blend shapes that are going to be created on her legs propagate properly onto the surface of her leggings is very important. This is not necessary for her bra, mesh top, gloves, and her socks. Their original lower resolution will suffice. They are intended to be looser fitting clothing articles, so we don't need to see exact outlines of her body being made on the surface of these meshes. The bra is fitted, but it perfectly stays out of range of the regions I plan on doing aggressive corrective morphs in. If I find that any of these clothing articles need to better echo the underlying deformations of the body, I will just go back to ZBrush and grab higher resolutions of them. But for now, their original low resolution will suffice. By the way, there's still one very important article of clothing that will be wrap deformed in the main rig file, and that is her necklace or choker. I'm doing this because the pendant of the choker will be rigged in the main rig file, and I decided to keep it strapped with the pendant so that I can monitor penetration whilst the pendant is being animated. The next model change I made was with her separated head. For the old rig, I detached the head from the body and did this because I expected to have a large amount of blend shapes for her face rig, and I didn't want to have to duplicate an entire body every time I needed a blend shape. There are several solutions around this issue, one of which involves exporting the target blend shapes for safekeeping and deleting them from the scene after they've been connected to the source rig. But it turns out that because of the new way that Maya allows you to resolve blend shapes as of Maya 2016 by altering vertices on a single mesh, I didn't need many duplicate blend shape target meshes in the scene. Anyways, for this rig, I'm going with one body mesh that has the head connected. This makes things a little easier for advanced skeleton, and I don't have to worry about a separation line at render time, as this character transitions between different outfits that do not cover the separation line. The way I cheated with the old rig was that I just had the choker covering the separation line. But if the choker came off, I'd have some lines showing up at render time. The last model change I made is related to her mouth. After rigging the character's face the first time, I noticed a not so attractive line at the corner of her mouth when her mouth closes. This could have been resolved with a corrective blend shape, but the problem starts at the way her cheeks transition into her mouth. It was a bad design choice that I had to smooth out. This will help to minimize how much corrective blend shaping has to be done if there are any issues when the mouth closes. A good way to get around problems like this is to model the character with the mouth closed. This makes skinning a little difficult, but the way to get around the skinning issue is to open the mouth just a little bit, not as wide as I have it open, but just enough so that the geometry isn't touching and confusing the joints that it's supposed to be assigned to. I also made some adjustments to the teeth to accommodate the newly adjusted circumference of the mouth. And just to make sure I have enough teeth for a smile on the new rig, I increased the height of her teeth. Alright, so I'm going to close out this lesson by running an advanced skeleton cleanup on the model. As mentioned previously, advanced skeleton does a thorough cleaning by exporting the mesh as an OBJ file and re-importing it into the scene. This wipes out any local Maya nodes and settings not supported by the OBJ format. So as I mentioned, I'm going to have to re-establish these groups after cleanup, and I will also need to re-enter all my Arnold displacement settings. One thing the cleaner does a good job of is preserving the shading networks, so that is a good thing. To help the cleaner better operate, I will ungroup all my geometry to be transferred into a parent group called Geo that advanced skeleton wants to see, and I'll delete my group structure since I have it saved in a separate file. And by the way, this note in the scene is just a reminder for me to turn on subsurface scattering and emissive weights when it's time to render. When the weights of these shading properties are on or set to 1, Maya refuses to show shading properly in the viewport, and I like to see the character shading, so I keep the SSS and emission off until it's time to render the character. Alright, so I'll hit the Model Clean button in the Advanced Skeleton Preparation tab to pull up the Model Cleaning dialog box. I already created the group called Geo, so we don't need to mess with this first button. I'll just move on and press the Clean button down here. It exports and re-imports the geometry. But as I mentioned previously, all my shading networks should be intact, so I'll check that and we're good. So that's it for this lesson. When I come back in the next lesson, I will have re-entered all the displacement settings for the renderable meshes that we just cleaned up, which is just the body, the eyes, the teeth, the gums, and her choker necklace. And then we'll get started with the skeleton placement.